Hey, my name is Matt Johnson and I run whoismatt.com. It's a blog and it has a bunch of cool videos on it like this one. You should check it out. But don't do it right now because you're watching this video. So after, yeah, do that. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Konova Master Pan. This is it right here. It's actually super cool and it solves a problem that I didn't even know that I had until I saw it and I was like, that's incredibly useful. So let's walk through what it does. Before we do anything else, I'm going to show you how to set up the Konova Master Pan. In the box, you should have the instruction manual, the Master Panning mount itself, a panning mount adapter that will mount it to your slider, the guide bar, 2 end mounts, and a small bag with Q-tips and a wrench if you need it. So if you have all that, you're ready to go. It only takes about 3 minutes to set up. Let's do it really quickly here. Begin by taking the panning mount, ensuring that the rubber grips are facing down, and hand tighten it onto the shuttle track of your slider. You just want to crank it down decently tight, as tight as you can with your hand. You'll be able to tighten it up more in a little bit. Now we're going to attach the panning mount. This is super easy to do. If you look at the bottom, there's a circle that matches the panning mount circle. So you're going to lay it down on top of it, and it should slide right onto it. Whenever you put it on, I have noticed that there is actually an arrow on the panning mount that points in the direction of which way your camera should be facing. So what you need to do is make sure that whenever you put it on, that the arrow is facing in the rough direction, at least on this side of the slider where your camera will be facing. So in this case, I'm facing it toward the camera. In this, you actually want the tightening knob for your slider to be on the opposite side of the arrow of the panning mount. So make sure it's like that. If in doubt, just make sure that the arrow is on the same side as your measurement tick marks on your slider. So you're going to drop it on, line it up as best as you can. This is all just a rough estimation at this point. And then you're going to tighten this red knob here. And that is what is going to actually grip the Master Pan to everything else. And as long as you get it on tight enough, it's a pretty big grip here. You can tighten it down pretty hard. It's going to be metal against metal, and I have had no issues with it actually holding on to the slider. So as you can see, it's on there pretty solidly. Now this is the point where you can actually tighten the adapter mount further. So once you have it tightened down pretty tight, you can actually rotate it to tighten it on. You don't want to over tighten it and mess up your screw, but just decently tighten it and then loosen the metal rod here and slide it back around. That way your adapter is tightly mounted to the Master Pan module and everything is ready to go. Next step is to attach the 2 end mounts to the ends of your slider. As you can see, there's a screw hole on the end of your slider that matches up with the end mount, which makes things super easy. You're going to simply lower it onto that and it should fit perfectly onto it with 2 little metal parts to bookend it. You're just going to tighten it on till it is snug. I've flipped my slider around and now I'm going to attach the other end point just as before. If you're ever confused, remember that the red screws need to be facing outward. We are now ready to attach the guide bar. But in order to do that, you need to first adjust these screws on the end mount. And these are all nice thumb screws, which is nice. You're going to want to loosen both of them. And you're going to want to take your slider, the dolly track portion, and you're going to want to make sure that the lip of this edge here is below this. So you want this raised up. About there is good, just so it is above, and it will slide up underneath it like that. So what we're going to do with that is then do that on the other side too. If you're not sure about how high to set it, I would recommend a little below 10 on the guide bar. We are now ready to attach the guide bar. First, make sure that the arrow on the Master Pan module is facing directly out and away from the slider. And then look at your guide bar. You should have one end with a long groove and one end with a tiny groove. You're going to want to take the end with the long groove and actually slide it underneath the Master Pan module. Just a little ways under it is a little groove that you can slide it into. It'll slide straight on through just like that. Loosen this screw on top and you're going to slide it right underneath it. As you can see, it is a little adjustable, and I just popped this other end down. So now you're going to take the other screw here on the other side, loosen that, and the guide bar will slide right into it, lock it down, and now lock this one down, and congratulations, your Master Pan is now fully set up and ready to use. Well, once you put on the tripod head. Now your Master Pan is ready to use. I told you it was a pretty quick setup. Let's now look at some of the stuff you can do with the Master Pan. It all comes down to the end mounts here and where they are placed. If you have this screw tightened down directly in the middle and its other screw on the other side directly in the middle, when you slide back and forth, you will get no panning, and the Master Pan will just act like any other slider. If you loosen the top screw and you slide it one direction or the other, you will actually begin to experience a rotation in the Master Pan. As you can see, as I move it, it's actually panning. If you move the screw on the other end mount as well, you can get an even more extreme amount of panning. Here's a Master Pan with my 7D on it. First, make sure that the slider is loose and ready to travel. With no angle at all, as you can see, it just slides back and forth just like a regular slider. But if I rotate this one, this end point, and lock it in place, suddenly I've introduced a bit of panning. And we can introduce an even more extreme bit of panning by rotating the angle even further on the other end point. So now there's a pretty extreme amount of panning occurring. You may have also noticed that while this is panning, it's actually panning outward. And this is one of the cool features of the Master Pan. So if I wanted to shoot, say, a panorama of some big event in the distance, I could start here and have the right part of it, and as I pan, it's slowly recording everything from the event. I could see this being used if you were in a crowded room and you wanted a cool looking wide shot. Now, if we take the Master Pan and we flip it so that the endpoint mounts are now in the other opposite ends. In this case, the left one is now back and the right one is now forward. We're getting a more traditional parallax panning movement. This is my go-to use for the Master Pan. If I'm filming a wedding, for example, and I've got the wedding cake right here in front of me, then I'm going to want some cool slider shots of it, usually just to show off the prettiness and add a 3D effect to it. So whereas before I would be holding the camera and attempting to carefully rotate it around the cake an even amount while also being rushed and having 8 other things that I need to film at the same time, the nice thing about the Master Pan is that I have it all set up. I have it preset to this level of rotation, and so I just bring it in, set it up on the tripod, and I'm ready to pan and rotate around the cake. The nice thing is that you get an easily replicatable panning motion without having to stress about a ton of getting it right every time, making sure your hands aren't shaky, etc. Another cool thing about this here that you may not have noticed, with this being a Konova product, it is capable of being used with their time-lapse mount. So you could actually mount the time-lapse motor to the bottom of it, here just like you would on the regular slider. But now whenever you're shooting your time lapses, you can introduce a smooth parallax motion. So let's say that you're wanting to shoot a time lapse of a fountain or a statue or something with motion, and you also want to add a bit of rotation to it. You can now do it incredibly easy with the Master Pan. What's great is that the Master Pan isn't just limited to cake shots. If I wanted to, say, set up a ring on a table, instead of me having to get out my tabletop dolly, for example, I can now just take out the Master Pan and put it on the tripod next to the table and mimic that exact shot that I would be trying to get on a tabletop dolly without having to worry about a super smooth surface. So this negates the need for you to have an incredibly smooth table or floor for you to get a tabletop dolly shot with, and instead you can just bring your Master Pan, have it all set up, and you're ready for ring shots, cake shots, anything incredibly quickly. The only issue that I've run into with the Master Pan is that it makes the camera a little wobbly on the top of it, mainly because you're adding an extra layer in between it and the slider. So as long as you have it locked up on a tripod and you have a steady hand on it, you should be fine, but that's just something to keep aware of. Also, whenever I'm shooting weddings, I'm also throwing around my gear a lot because I don't have time to carefully, delicately pack it up. And you really want to make sure that you watch the guide bar here to make sure that it doesn't bend too much or get broken. As long as you put the slider on top of things, you should be fine, or disassemble it before travel. So as you can see, the Konova Master Pan is really useful and versatile, and I use it on nearly every shoot that I have, especially at weddings. If you're like me and find yourself rushing around to get various shots at weddings and other events and anything else that you're filming without a lot of time, I would definitely recommend checking out the Konova Master Pan. To download this video and to see other reviews like it, please visit whoismatt.com.